Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Dave Lucas. Now, Dave is a one half of the Ordinary Office, so we'll find out a little bit more about that in a moment. Dave, welcome to the Godcast. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Whereabouts? Where's home for you, Dave? Are you up in
It's
the northeast?
Jarrow, yeah. Bede's World.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll perhaps ask you a little bit about that in a minute. But first of all, Dave, just perhaps tell us a little bit about the Ordinary Office. There are lots of people on who watch and listen to the Godcast who might not be familiar
Yeah.
with it.
I've 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 always said some form of daily office. I spent 4 years training for the priesthood in the Catholic Church, where I read from the Catholic Breviary every day. Then I was part of the Northumbria community and used what was known as Celtic Daily Prayer. What became it when I was involved, there was no actual formal community. It was just a bunch of mates doing stuff, and Celtic prayer evolved out of that. But it got to the point about 6, 7 years ago where my sight had deteriorated so much that using any kind of office book, where you've got the marker ribbons and you've got a reading in one section and a psalm somewhere else, and it was just getting too difficult for me to do. But I was missing not being able to do it. And then I started talking to, at the time I was working with Disability in Jesus, and I was talking to other people with other disabilities who were all saying they missed having an office. So people with learning difficulties and things wanted something more simple. People who used symbols wanted something with symbols. And so we decided if we put it online, so it's online. So there's morning, midday, evening, night, and nocturne prayers. They're there online. They're there in text. They're there in symbols. They're there in audio and video. So you can take your pick. You can say it whichever way you like. And there's an Amen button on the website. So when you finished saying it, you click the Amen button, and the idea is that it lets other people know that someone's been online saying the same prayers as them. One of the things I really love about it, I get up in the middle of the night to do nocturne, and to see people who can't sleep and watch that Amen count go up
Yeah.
as people click on during the night. I love that. And when we first started, I thought, if we get 20 or 30 people a day, I'd be more than happy, and where some days we're getting a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm amazed by it.
It really just shows the power of a digital parish, doesn't it, Dave? And the ability to reach beyond the walls of a church. Were you quite um internet savvy, or did it meet
No,
a
I
learning
wasn't at
curve for
all.
you?
I'm still not that internet savvy, but I know enough to get by. I'm a user rather than a techie.
Yeah. And where did your Christian journey start, Dave? Have you been a
I was
Christian all
brought
your
up in a
life?
Roman Catholic family.
Yeah.
Like I said before, at 20, I went into a seminary with a missionary order, the Holy Ghost Fathers. I went to a missionary institute in Mill Hill, and I was there for 4 years, and I'd been ordained a deacon, and I was just a few weeks away from full ordination, when there was abuse going on that I knew about in the community that I would be living in once I was ordained. So I went to the principal of the order and I told him what I knew, and he told me to pack my bags and go home. So that was the end of that. My mum and dad were at that point, well, always were, but my mum and dad were very staunch Catholics, and dad didn't believe what I was telling them about what I knew was going on. So I came home to the northeast, but my dad wouldn't have me at home. Um, so I bummed around for a while, staying on friends' couches and stuff. And I got to know Andy Rain and John Skinner, who were two of the founders of the Northumbria community. I was a musician. They wrote me into playing guitar and writing music with them and things. Um, and I hung around that for a long time. Um, I didn't go back to a Catholic church. I'd left the seminary in the January 83. And in the July that year, I met the girl I'm now married to. We've been married 37 years this year. Um, she was Denise was a brand new Christian. She'd only just started going to church. And the order that I was with were putting it about that the reason that I'd left was that I was already seeing Denise while I was in the seminary, which wasn't true. And it hurt her deeply.
Mm.
So I just wouldn't get involved with the Catholic Church for a long, long time. And then through early 2000s, I met Bill Bravner, who was the Anglican rector of Jarrow, and he suggested I try out his parish. And so I got involved with the Anglican Church then.
Dave, just going back there a bit, I mean, when you describe what happened, you did it with a laugh. I'm guessing that was an ironic laugh when
It
you.
was a horrible time. It was an awful experience. And it's one that, 30 odd years on still has sort of some, ramifications even now. I'm doing bits of work with Loud Fence at the minute. Here in the Catholic diocese, my home Catholic diocese. Um, and I'm bumping into people that I haven't seen in, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Um, who are still under the illusion that, I left the seminary because of Denise. Um, so it never leaves you, this stuff.
I think, as we talk about historic abuse, a lot of people just don't want to talk about it, do they? They want to kind of just say sorry and move on quickly, kind of thing. But at the time, I guess it was quite traumatic. Was it physical abuse?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I've got a couple of friends who are. I mean, I'm coming up 64. I've got a couple of friends who are a bit older than me, who are sort of very late 60s, early 70s, who suffered abuse in seminaries, and you just need to spend 5 minutes with them to see how damaged they are. You know, that they're never over it, and it's just horrible.
And that experience of kind of effectively being kicked out of something that you took very seriously and that was a vocation for you and was a calling from God. What are the lasting impacts of that upon you, Dave?
Awful, because I always felt that sense of calling, and because I come from a Roman Catholic background, the only way you can interpret that within the Catholic Church is to become a priest. Um, so I felt that you know that was close to me. I'm very happily married, and I'm sure that was the right thing.
Hmm.
Um, but for years, like, I wouldn't even consider going to an Anglican church because it felt like betrayal. It felt like I was turning my back on the Catholic Church altogether.
Yeah.
Um, I tell people Catholicism is a bit like Judaism. It's not just a religion; it's a culture. I went to Catholic schools. All my mates were Catholics. Um, there's a strong Irish connection in both our families, and there's all of that. Um, so you couldn't just walk away from it. Um,
And to be a whistleblower, Dave, and for that to fall on deaf ears and to be turned away, was there ever any ramifications for that? Was there any kind of, or is it just there historically now as
15 years later, one of the people that I reported actually did time for it, but it took 15 years. And then the guy who threw me out of the seminary got in touch just a couple of years ago, wanting to have a chat, and I just couldn't deal with it. I
no.
just said no thanks.
Did you get help with that whole thing, or did you have to deal with
No,
it yourself?
no, I've just muddled through. Um, I've had other, during all that time, I've been dealing with my sight loss as well, and I've kind of had bigger things to worry about, really.
Yeah.
Um,
And when you eventually turned to the Anglican Church, Dave, was it a place of welcome? How,
it
that,
was very much so, and still is, but it has the same issues. I kind of came into it very naively thinking that, the issues around abuse and things didn't exist. They were particular to the Catholic Church, and they're not. And that's been quite a shock to me. I'm heavily involved in this campaign at the minute about safeguarding because it's horrible the way people are dealing with each other.
yeah. Tell us about your involvement with the safeguarding, Dave.
I've become friends with people like Martin Percy, Martin Sewell. Um, I used to, when I was with Disability in Jesus, we used to go to the York Synod every year with our exhibition stand, and I used to meet all of these people there, and just listen to what was going on, and met lots of survivors at Synod in York a few times, and it just echoed so many of my experiences. And then what's happened with the ordinary office is we've now got like 21,000 followers on Twitter, which I'm amazed by. And it started out as an aid, like I said, to help people who were struggling to read an office. But it's become a kind of place of exile for all kinds of people who feel disenfranchised from mainstream churches for lots of reasons. So we've got like a strong gay following, we've got a strong BAME following, a strong disabled following, and a strong survivor following. And I think the common ground for all of those different groups is that feeling of being somehow outside,
Yeah.
shut out.
And what's your kind of, when you look at the Church of England in 2024 and its response to safeguarding, are you disenfranchised from that
Um,
process? Or
I'm, I struggle because we know some wonderful Anglicans, and you just need to sit on Twitter for a couple of hours, and they're all there. And there's lots of really wonderful Anglicans fighting for justice on this, and not just justice for survivors, but to make it safer in the future. So there's a lot of good people out there that, as individuals, it's great. But there's something that seems to happen when we get into the institution of the Anglican Church that it just sort of goes a bit weird. Um, for me, I mean, I spend my working life. I used to spend disability equality training, and for me, I think it stems from the issue of the established Church of the nation having opt-outs to equality law, and therefore it does not realise just how far secular world has moved on equality.
yeah,
And when the Church of England talks about equality, they're talking about a completely different beast to what the secular world means by equality. And I kind of think we need to get real. When we talk about declining numbers in the Anglican Church, I think that the current generation are the most ethical generation there's been in a long, long time.
yeah,
Highly ethical. And they look at the Anglican Church and they say, this place is corrupt. And they're not walking away from Jesus, they're walking away from the church.
yeah. When been very fortunate, Dave, throughout my life where I haven't been directly impacted by a disability. My grandma, who died a few years ago, spent the last few weeks of her life in a wheelchair, and I had to take her just across Burnley on a couple of occasions. And just in that very brief experience, I realized how difficult it was just pushing a wheelchair from A to B, getting out of
Yeah,
the car, getting it to the shop, getting it to another shop, going up the pavement, how uneven the pavements were.
yeah.
And you're a gentleman that was fully sighted for a large period of your life. Just tell us, if you could, the the change from being an able-bodied person to living with a disability? And you
it
talked
was
about, Dave,
sudden.
you talked about the struggles with safeguarding and intimidation and bullying in the church. But this is something else that you've had to deal with as well, isn't it?
It stood my life on its head. I used to manage a bunch of bakeries all over the country, 120 bakeries all around the UK. And I was driving and I had a company car and I was doing sort of 50, 60,000 miles a year. And I had a near miss one day on the motorway and I knew it was my fault. I just hadn't seen this car coming up on to the side. So I made an appointment with a consultant, and he said, "You do know you're losing your sight, Dave, don't you?" And I said, "No." This was on a Wednesday morning. He
How
said,
long
"Well,
ago,
you
Dave?
are."
How
I
long
was
ago
20.
was this?
This was 1987. I was 27. Um, and this was a Wednesday morning. He said, "I'll give you till Friday. If you haven't voluntarily handed your driving license in by Friday, I'm going to have to report you. You are not safe." So I went into work the next morning and told my boss what was going on. His response was, "Give me your car keys, clear your desk." And 20 minutes later, I was standing out in the car park without a job. I'd just got married. I just bought a house. And it just, my whole world fell apart. And for 10 years, I just wouldn't talk about it with anybody, was really angry about it. Um, it got to the point where I knew my wife was really struggling and was probably on the verge of leaving me. So I knew I had to do something. But I didn't want to be held. I didn't, for me, there was a stigma about being blind. And I thought I was hiding it. I thought I was managing to hide it from people. But turns out everybody knew. But I didn't know that they knew. Um, but it got to the point where I couldn't walk down the street without, like, I've got no peripheral vision. So if somebody's coming out of their garden gate, I'll walk into them because I can't see them coming that way. Somebody opens a car door on the other side, I'll walk into that. Can't see it. And I was crashing into people all the time, and they were making comments like, "Are you blind or what?" And worse than that.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to do something, but I didn't. I still couldn't cope with the idea of being seen as blind. So I went and made inquiries about what would happen if I went on the visual impairment register without letting my wife at least know that I was looking into it because she's a nurse. She would have held me to it if she'd known. So I wasn't sure I could deal with it. So I went and found out about it. And it got to the point where guide dogs offered me the chance to go and have an assessment for a guide dog, at which point I had to tell her. What swung the whole thing and changed my life completely. At that point, I was heavily involved in the whole Northumbria community stuff. Celtic Christianity was a big thing for me. And they brought this dog out to meet me, my first guide dog. And they said, "This is your dog. He's called Abbott." The idea of me being led by an abbot, I just thought, you know, I can remember sitting and looking at the ceiling and saying, "Okay, God, I get it now." You know, um, and Abbott changed my life. Abbott
Wow.
taught me that like being blind is not the end of the world. In
No.
fact, I tell people now that my blindness informs my faith.
Yeah. But at the time when it was going on and you were
I
losing,
spent 10 years just telling the whole world to f off.
yeah. Did
You
it,
know,
I mean, you say now it informs your faith. What did it do to your faith at the time?
at the time it was awful because all my church, I was so angry, and I was drinking a lot, I was swearing a lot. I was going from, as my sight kept getting worse, each time it got a bit worse, I, I was able to do a bit less. So the kind of work that was being offered was getting more, more and more poorly paid. And I was getting more and more angry. And all my church friends were just kind of, "Look at that angry bloke, we don't want to be around this anger. One of the things that I like about the ordinary office now is that lots of people come to us in that kind of place, but they're really angry.
Mm.
And one of the things I've had to, I often get private messages from people saying, Dave, have you seen this comment from so and so? They're really angry, you need to ditch them. And what I'm saying to people is, look, no, this is the place for them, right? They can come here, they can be angry, they can have a bit swear, they can behave badly, right? And they can work it out. And if anybody has to leave, if you're offended by that, you leave, you know? Um, and that's what happened to me. I mean, all my Christian friends just sort of disappeared.
So what got you through? What got you through it? I mean, I see that guitar. I'm going to see if you're going to play me a tune after, but what did you said you were drinking heavily and you were getting angry and that, but what was the equilibrium in your life that you found to kind of calm the storm?
It was realizing, that my wife had had enough.
Yeah,
Um, that's never been a negotiable thing for me, you know. She stood, I always said that, when the priest said to Denise, for better or for worse, I don't think she realized how much of the worst there would be, you know, but she stood by me through all of it. Um, and the thought of losing, was just, I couldn't bear it.
yeah,
Um,
and
so
coming
that,
to
that
coming
made
to
me wake up.
terms and coming to terms with the loss of your sight. How did you reconcile that as with your Christian faith? What happened?
Um, I don't think I've ever blamed God for the loss of my sight. I've 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 shouted at him about the way I've been treated because of my sight loss. But I don't think I've ever blamed him for it. Um, for me, it's kind of, when people do the why me thing, it's kind of well, why not?
Mm,
Um, the theology of disability is kind of an emerging thing, and the thing that appeals to me about it is that this picture of, the Jesus that ascended into heaven ascended with his wounds. Um, I remember when Stephen Hawking died, there was a cartoon doing the rounds on social media of Stephen Hawking's outside the pearly gates in his wheelchair, getting out of his wheelchair and walking into heaven. And I thought, well, why would that be? That's who he was, and my blindness is so much part of me
yeah,
that it's who I am. You know,
yeah.
so I kind
How
of
were
believe
you
that.
treated, Dave? How were you treated? When you say you got
Um,
how you were treated. Tell us about that.
it's bad. I mean, getting political, I suppose, but the Tories have turned people against disabled people, and so you get stupid comments. If I mean, I've got no sight in one eye, and I've got a small amount of sight in the other that comes and goes, but I like to use it as much as I can use it. So if I'm out shopping with Denise and I pick something off a shelf and hold it really close, I can make out the picture, but I can't make out the words. But I know enough, like things that you buy all the time. I know what a tin of Heinz beans looks like, sort of thing. So I just pick something up off the shelf, But if I pick something up off the shelf and hold it in front of my face, someone else will make a comment. Look at that. You're supposed to be blind. Look, what the hell's it got to do with anybody else? Well, what I'm doing, you get that, um, and a lot worse. Um, the first day I came home with a guide dog, one of our neighbors came out into the street and went like this to me: "How many fingers? If you can see my fingers, you don't need a guide dog." You know.
Mm.
Um, I'm not alone in this. I know lots of blind people who are having this kind of treatment every day.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
and Dave, what do you miss, if you don't mind me asking, what do you miss most about not being able to see? That might
driving,
sound like a silly question, but
driving,
driving.
driving. It's the independence of it. I mean, my wife drives and she'll take me anywhere I want to go. but she works, so I have to wait till she's free to take me. It's that thing of, being able to just pick up your car keys and go whenever you want to go.
Yeah.
Um, I miss that. Um, Probably that more than anything. I miss reading sleeve notes on CDs.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no bigger thrill for me than going and buying a new album and on the way home, on the metro or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
reading the cover notes on the way home.
Yeah.
I miss that a lot.
And this all led to you forming Disability in Jesus, didn't it? I mean, it's quite a big shift. That's a big thing to take on. And it went on to be very successful. What was your driving force? Was it your own experience and to help others?
Yeah, yeah. I was involved in a project working for the RNIB on a project, and they sent me this pack with all these stats in it, and it said that 38% of the UK population had either a serious illness or long-term disability. And I remember I read that one Saturday afternoon, and then the Sunday morning I was standing at the back of church, and I was thinking, well, 38% of these people aren't. So where are they? And the truth is that the majority of disabled and seriously ill people no longer come to church. And it kind of really hit me just as suddenly as that, really, that like,
Yeah.
where are they? The ones, the disabled people that, every church can talk about somebody they know with some big disability and what they've overcome and things. But they're the minority. I mean, I tell people there are only 2,800 guide dog owners in the UK, but there are 2.1 million people on the visual impairment register.
Mm.
So where are the rest of them?
Yeah.
The people you see out with a guide dog are really, a minuscule minority of
Yeah. Gosh,
visually
that's
impaired
quite a
people.
powerful statistic, that.
It's huge. And so that kind of drove me into that. And then meeting Bill and Katie and Katie Tipling's got cerebral palsy and has a bit of a hard time. It's hard enough being a woman priest, but being a woman priest with cerebral palsy, the kind of some of the abuse that Katie was getting was awful, you know. And Bill has had struggles with mental health and and had a very kind of unsympathetic hearing from several quarters. So we decided we were going to do it, and we ran it. Well, they're still going. I moved on to do the ordinary office because it was becoming so busy on its own.
Yeah. And it has come very busy on its own. Tell people who might be interested to check it out, where they can go and what they might find there, Dave.
So it's www.theordinaryoffice.co.uk, and you will find the sets of the daily prayers in all the different forms. And you'll find a little bit of other information about the other things that Rebecca and I were involved with.
Just tell people about Rebecca because obviously she's your I
I've
don't know
been
if the
doing
straight
I've
straight
been doing the office on my own for a couple of years, and I didn't know Rebecca, and she contacted me. I'd been kind of asking people for help on Twitter, saying I was struggling on my own, and she offered to help. And it turns out we're from. She doesn't live up here now, but she's from South Shield, which is just a mile down the road from me. So we're kind of soulmates in the terms that we're both Geordies. So there's a kind of common culture there as well. Um, and Rebecca's got a real heart for things like safeguarding, gender issues. She's taken me into areas that I would never have dreamed of going. And I can't believe that some of the things that, some of the areas that we're in now, that I would never have dared to go. I would have been frightened to go.
Yeah.
She's incredibly brave that way, and I love it.
And now as a chap in your sixties, you say, what where, what spiritually sustains you? Is it the capacity to just carry on doing the ordinary office, or you're in a very special part of the world in Jarrow? I was lucky enough to come there on pilgrimage when I was first ordained, and there's some incredible sights up where you are. Just tell us about.
I'm still incredibly influenced by the whole Celtic Christian stuff. Um, I spend a lot of time on Holy Island. Um, there's a church in Northumberland called Old Buick. I spend a lot of time there. I spend a lot of time Ministrator's Monastery up in um, kind of borders of County Durham and Northumberland as well. Um, that whole kind of all the Celtic saints have been a big influence on me. The Celtic hospitality. For me, that's the key. It's about hospitality, you know. I'm not out to convert people. I'm out to make people welcome. Um, I don't see converting people as my business. I see people making people welcome as my business,
Mm,
and it's God's business what happens after that,
yeah.
you know.
Here to that. I think that's one of the church problems, isn't it?
The biggest thing I've been learning in the last couple of years, I keep going back to the call of the apostles, you know, and Jesus saying to them, you know, will you come?
Yeah,
And you know, the ones that were kind of respond, I need to go and sort this out. No, no, you know, will you come? Just will you? And that's all I'm saying to people. Look, you know, there's a bunch of us on this journey on a pilgrimage. We don't know where it's going.
no,
We don't know what he's asking of us. What we do know is it's a great place to be. And so I'm saying to people, will you come?
yeah, lovely. And there
And
will be people, Dave, of faith watching this who are thinking, I'd like to pray for uh, the ordinary office. Is there anything we can pray for you and your community?
um, for the kind of uncertainty that we live with, I mean, like I say, we don't know where we're going. You know, a couple of years ago, we weren't involved with safeguarding. We weren't involved with trans people. You know, I'm a product of my generation and my upbringing. You know,
Yeah,
in the area that I live in you know, in Jarrah, um, I wouldn't know where there are any trans people in Jarrah. Um, so the thought of meeting my first trans person was like daunting because I didn't want to put my foot in it
yeah.
because I've not met any before. So you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know what to say, what to do, you know, and we're being led into all these areas of places where I've never been before that I'm happy to be, but that I'm still really nervous about as well because I just don't know what I'm doing.
I think that's wonderfully honest, and I think a lot of Christians can learn from that. I've had people who are trans on the Godcast, and a bit like yourself, Dave. You're little bit anxious because you may not have met them or been in their company before, and I think that can apply to disabled people. Some people just don't know how to approach it or respond,
I
and
had a one year we went at Synod in York. I got there on the Friday before Bill and Katie, and I had all the exhibition stand kit with me. My wife took me down to York. She had to go back home to work. So she literally dropped me on the curb with my luggage, my guide dog, and the entire contents of our exhibition stand and left me sitting on the path waiting for Bill and Katie to arrive. And up comes Bob Callahan from Inclusive Church that I'd not met before. And asked who I was, and I told him what, you know. He disappeared and he came back with a trolley and he loaded all this kit onto the trolley and he took me into the exhibition hall and he set up the exhibition stand. Then he took Jarvis, my guide dog, for a walk and spent him and picked up the poop and all of that. And I hadn't met this bloke, you know. That night at evening meal, clergy were coming up to me saying, So you're friends with Bob Callahan. You do know he's gay, and that inclusive church lot, You're never going to get well thought of if you hang about with them,
Really?
right? Well, that changed my mind on things. That made me more determined to hang about with them. Um, and I've been made so welcome by that community, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Likewise.
And what I say is, how can I ask for equality for me as a disabled person and then deny equality to someone else?
Yeah,
Can't do
absolutely.
it.
Yeah. Well, David, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This 30 minutes has absolutely shot by. I can see your guitar and I know the Celtic spirituality, music's important, as is music in the Northeast. Can I tempt you to play us out with something, Dave? Can you
Oh, I don't know.
come on?
I'll try. I'll try.
Just before you finish, just to remind people that go and check Dave's site out, The Ordinary Official. They're on Twitter and online, and I've been looking. It's a really great site. And Dave, as you play us out, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been lovely chatting.
Been a pleasure. Should have tuned up before I started, really. Sorry.
Go for it.
The spirit is willing, but no.